coming up. First up, though, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected once again US calls for a two-state solution as he vowed that the Gaza offensive by the Israeli Defense Forces would continue for months ahead. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Eyal Biram. He's Israel Defense Forces reserve captain. Also still with us in the studio, Charlie Rowley. Good afternoon to you, Eyal. Now, it must be made clear that this is not new from Benjamin Netanyahu. He has his entire political career. He said he doesn't think that two-state solution is the answer. Now, I think for a lot of people, again, who don't spend their lives thinking about these issues in the Middle East, two-state solution is that, there should be a Palestinian state as well as an Israeli state. The issue there is what you mean by a Palestinian state, how much of the current Israeli state it would take, and how those two states, if they were put into place, would exist side by side. But this isn't a new idea. This has been tried for many, many years. Huge input by virtually every American president we've had for decades, and other leaders around the world. And yet it hasn't come about. Do you think a two-state solution is the only viable answer?
I think the answer for that, starting by understanding the Palestinian narrative, what's happened on October 7th, and this is right now the main reaction and also the concerns for the average Israeli when they are thinking about the future of the state. And I would like to quote Khaled Mashal, the international leader of Hamas, what he said just on January 18th. He said, "We reject the two-state solution. October 7 is showing us that liberating Palestine from the river to the sea is realistic and already begun." And here I want to ask if 82% of the people who live in Judea and Samaria, not in Gaza, think that Hamas, what they did on October 7th, is amazing. And if
people were celebrating on the streets when the news of this massacre happened.
By the way, also in the streets of London, but we'll speak later about it. If 80% of them think that it's fantastic to murder, to rape, and to torture people from their beds by doing nothing, just by living their life. So I think the answer is there is no future for two-state solution, not because of Israel is rejecting it, because the Palestinian people continue to educate their kids to hate, to slaughter, and that the highest value of life is to be a shaheed.
And we see the propaganda that's been found in schools in Gaza, where children are basically taught, being a suicide bomber, killing Jews. I mean, literally telling 5-, 6-year-old children that killing Jews is your aim in life. I mean, this is extraordinary, isn't it? Look, there will be millions of Palestinian people, many living in Jordan, also neighbouring Israel, also and in Gaza, and people around the world, the displaced people, who do want peace and who do want to live that life, a life side by side. Unfortunately, there is the issue in terms of the leadership. We have Hamas, we have Hezbollah, but we also have so-called, moderate Muslim leadership, Palestinian Authority and others. But the reality is the so-called moderates are not what most of us in the West would regard as moderates when you actually dig down in a very shallow way to their actual opinions that they have expressed in their founding documents of their organisations, and indeed that they've given in speeches only in recent years.
Yeah, and if the Palestinian Authority pays 7% of its overall budget for prisoners who sit in Israeli jail and convicted for terror crimes, and we're speaking about murder, about people who try to blow people alive from sitting in restaurants, if their 7% of the budget is not invested in building hospitals, but rather than that, in continuing and incentivizing more people...
They pay to your family.
They pay for your family and also for you sitting in jail. And while the Palestinian people, especially Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, still haven't condemned October 7th. And he mentioned that Israel is the one who did October 7th, which is, of course, far from the truth.
OK, but here's the thing. Palestinian people concerned about the Palestinians in Gaza will say, October the 7th, I mean, I don't know how anyone could justify it on any basis. I think those people are sick. But it didn't happen in a vacuum. The last 75 years have also happened. Palestinian people, now, whether rightly or wrongly in the views of many Israelis, and again, many Israelis have different views on their government over the years, they were forcibly moved from their homes. They feel their land has been stolen from them. The decisions by the UN, by Western governments to draw lines in the sand and go, here you go, they feel they have as much right, if not more right, to that land as Jewish Israelis do. They have a legitimate argument there. How does this end if you've got two groups of people, two ethnicities, two religions claiming the same land? Does might always win?
I think it's important to understand also the Israeli side when we look on what's happening right now. And I'm speaking about people in my age who left universities, who left the work, and in the last 3 months and more been fighting in Gaza. And hopefully it won't happen, but they soon will fight with Hezbollah in the north, as we understand that the terror group in Lebanon is forcing Israel to start a war also in that area. And it's important to understand that an average Israeli hope for peace, prefer to have his life better, and would not like to invest his time with uniform rather than that on creating different inventions or just to work for different startups or anything that makes the world a better place.
Pretty much all the Israeli population at some point has to do national service in the IDF.
When we compare it to what's happening right now on the Palestinian side, as we understood it on October 7th, we understood that it's not a matter of motivation, this is a matter of their capability to create more and more massacre. And if Hamas leaders continue to say over the media that they are aiming to do October 7th again and again, so the Israelis do not want to speak about peace, not because they don't want peace, because they understand that peace will cost for them not with just 1,200 people who've been murdered on the day of October 7th, but with tens of thousands of people that can continuously be murdered if it will be not just in Gaza, but also in Judea and Samaria.
But again, the argument back would be, but then again, this term, the chief rabbi has criticised this term, and I agree with him, the use of the word massacre, that this is a massacre, this is a genocide of the Palestinian people. Thousands of children in particular have been killed in the bombing of Gaza, and that this cannot continue. Humza Yousaf, who is, of course, the Scottish First Minister, he was asked in a BBC interview with Laura Kunsberg yesterday if he believed, I thought it was a very leading question, actually, if he believed people placed a different value on the lives of Muslims and Palestinians. He replied, without a shadow of a doubt, you talk to anybody who is Palestinian, people in the Muslim community, they feel that the Palestinian blood is very cheap. What do you respond to that?
It's disgusting. I don't have any other word to say. I think the Israelis is the one who put the value of the Palestinian life better from Hamas and the other Palestinian leader who do not care when the people have been killed in the streets. When Hamas deciding and deliberately putting his camps behind hospitals, schools, and UN facilities. Should we ask this question, is Hamas do not value the life of the Palestinian people? If Israel is announcing again and again for people to move from one area to another, to not be hurt in any attack targeted for terrorists and not for civilians, of course, I think the answer is, again, Hamas deliberately put the life of Palestinians lower than the life of any other.
They actually, at one point, were stopping people leaving buildings which they knew were going to be bombed. And of course, we have to make the point that, I've got no time for Benjamin Netanyahu, and I know an awful lot of Israelis don't either. He's not actually a very popular figure as Prime Minister, leading a coalition government, a very wide-ranging coalition government in Israel. But in Israel, the Muslim population has grown and grown. Very, very, very senior. I mean, the head of the Israeli National Bank, senior judges and others are of the Muslim faith. Well, I don't think you see people of the Jewish faith doing well, succeeding in Gaza or indeed in many other Middle Eastern countries where Jews are simply find life is not safe for them. Very big contrast, which seems to always get overlooked. That the Muslim population of Israel is growing and thriving. Yeah,
25% of the Israeli population are Muslims, and they have a wonderful life. And that's why when anyone speaking about a Palestinian state, they always say we are aiming to have a Palestinian state, but we want to stay in Israel. And we should understand that people around the Arab world understand that, one, Israel will stay forever, and they accept it. And we speak about Saudi and many other countries that right now look to normalize relations with Israel, although there is a war with Hamas. And the second understanding we have is that any sovereignty by the Palestinian people, and the example is what's happened in Gaza, because Israel left Gaza in 2005 to have a peace with the Palestinian people.
And look what they did, yeah.
And less than 20 years after, we have the largest terror camp around the world.
Yeah. Charlie Rowley, can I just bring you in? Because I think for a lot of us in the West, we don't, people don't all that knowledge about all of this. It's part of lots of we've not been to, but also not understanding the passions, the history, the resentments, the anger, the pain on both sides over the decades.
And that's what gets lost in the debate. It is the history. It has been a long running issue with the desperate situation in that particular part of the world and the region. And I just want to come back to what you said earlier on about the future and young people. I think everybody wants peace. Everybody wants to make sure that anybody who is born, wherever you're born, you can live a life as full and as freely as you possibly can. And that will take, I think, the next generation, young people in Israel, in Palestine, to have to find a solution to work together.
I don't think everybody does want peace.
A solution.
I think that's the problem.
Well,
peace on what terms?
And it's on what terms? But the longer the situation continues, where you have young people that are born under a desperate situation, a terror conflict, whether you are a victim or you know someone that's been a victim, clearly of what happened as a terrorist attack on the 7th of October, or perhaps on the other side, you're going to grow in a society full of hate, and that won't do anybody any good. So we need to find a peaceful resolution as soon as possible.
We absolutely
I
do.
hope.
We certainly. I mean, again, all right-thinking people want peace and a peaceful solution and
we
compromise.
should just remember that's the last thing, that when people are staying and living in Gaza, they're not looking for, as we look for about Western world and want to live their life better. And that's the problem.
Absolutely.
I hope it will be better.
We shall wait and see. Il Beram, he is an IDF reserve captain. Thank you very much indeed.